Welcome back to the Puck Bunker. I'm Rocco Zappia, joined as always by my co-host, the man who took one look at the Statue of Liberty and said, I could pull that dress off better, Darren Boyce. And speaking of great things from New York, we got Greg from Blueshirts Breakaway. How you doing, Greg? Thanks so much for joining us.
I'm good. I will apologize to you guys in advance. We are recording a little later at night than I was prepared. The Mets are in the bottom of the ninth. They have a one-run lead. If I start crying, you'll just know why. It's not Ranger related. It'll be Met related.
I love the sports fandom right here.
That is spoken like a true New Yorker who just allows his teams to hurt him over and over and over. But a loyal bunch you guys are. And New York will be our topic of the day. We covered the Islanders earlier in the summer, and now we're going to cover the big bad Rangers. So, Greg, give us your thoughts. Let's start with the season that was. I know there was a lot going on in New York, some big moves. Give us your kind of thoughts on this past season and what kind of taste that left in your mouth as a Rangers fan who probably had higher expectations for the team coming into the year.
Bad was the correct word choice. So just to give myself a little bit of a background, I've been doing this Ranger podcast. This will be season 11 of the show somehow. Don't know how that happened. Of the 11 years that we've had the podcast, there have been some down years. There have been some rebuilding years. We went through the letter. We went through some low periods. Last year was the least enjoyable season I've had watching the Rangers since we started the podcast. They were unwatchable at times. They quit on themselves. They quit on their coaches. They quit on the fans. The performance on the ice is what led to all the moves that we saw, and they were needed because it was just rotten to its core. I know you guys are Sens fans. I'm sure you've had some bad years. I'm sure you've had some worse years too. I'm sure I'm speaking from a place of privilege. I understand that. I can only speak of my experience. Last year was horrendous. Absolutely horrendous.
So are there any kind of particular moments or even particular players that just kind of led to this disappointment? I know there's a few guys that kind of had some down years or down starts to the year. Former Sen Mika Zibanejad being one of them. Sorry to point that one out. But is there anyone that was, kind of really kind of, got you going here?
Listen, if you want Mika Zibanejad back, we could work it out. I won't even need much in return. You can do whatever the heck you want at that point in time. Zibanejad was chief among them, but not number one. I know, oh my God, if the Mets lose this game, I'm going to have a hard time. But it's not a popular opinion because of how historic he is as a Ranger, his place in Ranger history, and what he meant to the fan base. And I respect all that, and I understand all that. Chris Kreider was front and center. Once Chris Kreider's name was put into the trade rumors in November, it seemed like Kreider was like, I'm good. Nothing I got to do here. And he kind of took the locker room with him. Sorry. Bases loaded, nobody out in a one-run game. I don't think that's good. I'd go so far to say that's bad if you want the honest, unbridled truth. Chris Kreider was a big reason why that locker room tanked. Jacob Trouba, obviously. I mean, we're not breaking any news there with what the Rangers hoped to do over the summer with Trouba, what they weren't able to do, what they ended up doing. And then Zibanejad's performance, he's a historically slow starter. So when he came out of the gates tough in October and November, I actually felt the need and compelled to defend him a little bit. But then it just never got better. And his inability to potentially play center for the Rangers moving forward with how far his performance has fallen, it puts the Rangers in a really difficult situation in terms of what they can do, what the lineup will look like, how they can balance the lines. So Zibanejad's like the big question going into this season. I would love to just blame all of last year on Mika Zibanejad, but to me, I Kreider, he was the leader of the pack, and then Trouba followed him from there, and now they're both Ducks. So
we had Mika Zibanejad in Ottawa, and look, when I was in university, I spent a lot of time bartending in the various bars downtown, and I knew that circuit pretty well. And it was not a rare occasion that DJ Zbad would show up to give a very late night, unprompted set. And I may suggest some of those hours may have been better spent doing hockey-related activities. But hey, you're passionate about something. You're passionate about something, I suppose, as we can attest to. Do we ever see him doing the nightclub scene in New York? Is he at the 40/40 Club doing a resident DJ set?
Listen, New York City's music scene is probably too strong where he can't get gigs. No offense to you, gentlemen, just might be a little easier to get a bar in Ottawa to let you DJ on a random night than it is in New York City. Honestly, his DJing doesn't bother me. I'm happy he's passionate about something. And the thing that's tough about Mika Zibanejad is before last season, the tides were turning a little bit. All right, we got it out. Boys, we're alive. We're alive. They got hope. The tides have been turning because his last two playoffs before the last season were underwhelming. He got embarrassed by Nico Hischier and the Devils when the Rangers lost in 7 games 2 years ago. Last year, he was good against the Capitals, but the Capitals, or 3 years ago, and then 2 years ago, he was good against the Capitals, but the Capitals were kind of just like happy to be there. His performance in the playoffs has always dried up as the competition has gotten tougher. So this year was the Rangers will only go as high as Mika Zibanejad would take them type year, and he didn't take them anywhere, so it didn't go very high, which is a shame because, like, going back to the trade itself, that was a marvelous trade the Rangers pulled off. It was Derek Brassard, and the Rangers also got a second-round pick back in the deal. Like, it's a shame that the conversation about Zibanejad has now turned to this point where it's hard to talk about him positively, because honestly, like, that trade, and probably just to keep everything north of the border, the Scott Gomez for Ryan McDonough trade, like, those are two of the best trades the Rangers have made in the last 20 years. And both trades are responsible for a lot of wins that the Rangers have gotten. But last year, it left a sour enough taste in my mouth where the things Mika Zibanejad is going to have to do this year to get back in my good graces at his age, I just don't think are possible. It's too bad. There's a way for him to have a successful and productive season coming up. I'm just not sure. Him being a right winger now, it's just like the Rangers' center depth is not deep enough where Mika Zibanejad not playing quality center, it's a problem. So we'll have to see how it goes, but we're off to a bad start, to put it bluntly.
I just want to point out that no Sens fan was happy about that trade. Even though they performed quite well the next year, they still were not happy about that trade. So that was only management who wanted to do that. Just going to point that one out. So maybe a little bit more positive tone. Were there any players that you're kind of happy with their performance last year? Anyone you were kind of, pleasantly surprised with?
To answer the first part of the question, no, there was nobody I was happy with. But it's only like I would have been thrilled with the year Will Cooley had if it wasn't buried on the terrible season in which the Rangers existed. Will Cooley went from being a really good, perfectly fine third-line winger that provided some sandpaper in the bottom of the Rangers lineup with a scoring touch. He went from that to, I think he had 50 points. He definitely had north of 20 goals. he was the only bright spot on the Rangers throughout the season. And he's gotten to a point where, like, Will Cooley's now at the point where I'd love to use him on the third line because I believe it creates lineup imbalance if you're going up against some of the better teams in the NHL. But if Will Cooley is your opening night top line left wing or second line left wing, I feel really good about it. That is not an emotion I would have had at the beginning of last season. So all the credit in the world to Will Cooley for getting to that point. But 2 outs now. I know everyone in Ottawa really cares about this Met game. Will Cooley is the answer to your question. If you put a gun in my head and made me pick a second player to say, well, he was actually pretty good last year for the Rangers, and I wasn't allowed to say Igor Shesterkin, who's just good all the time, wouldn't be able to find you a second player. I have no problem saying that.
So just to follow up on that, I guess you kind of stated that there. I mean, Igor Shesterkin's numbers were down. I thought he still played pretty well. I assume you're still in that camp as well. It was just more of a team-related thing in front of him that was more of the issue with his play.
I don't think there was any issue with Igor Shesterkin's play. If nobody is playing hockey in front of you, there's only so much a goalie can do. If you have to stop 45 shots a night in order to get a win, it's just not a winning strategy. To me, Igor Shesterkin is still the best goalie in the NHL. I don't believe there is a clear cut. You want to have the Connor Hellebuck conversation, I'm here for it. If you want to go legacy and say Andre Vasilevsky, I'll hear you. But to me, I'd rather have Igor in a Game 7 than either of those two guys. So I have no problem with anything Igor did last year. There's not an ounce of fault that falls at his feet. To me, he played as well as you could have hoped in the circumstances. So no, I have nothing bad to say about Igor Shesterkin. And there are only so many. Come on, get him out. Boys, what a win. Huh? Come on. What? He just wanted to make it difficult is all he wanted to do.
The live reaction. That's what we wanted right there.
All right. I lost a couple days off my life tonight because of this baseball game. But, hey, win's a win, baby. That's all that matters at the end of it.
If no one knew you were from New York before that sequence, I think everyone would know without even having to ask after that.
But like firmly the fun part of New York. Like, you don't want a Yankee fan on here reacting this way about a game in September. Like, I'm the portion of the fan base that actually doesn't really know what it's like to win very often.
Nobody likes Yankees fans. Even other New Yorkers don't like Yankees fans. Come on. That's like the Cowboys. That's like the Leafs. Just maybe English soccer fans is universally disliked by other fan bases.
Well, the going joke the last week was Yankee fans have had it tough. They traded for Luka Doncic, but they just traded Micah Parsons. It's a hard time. Like, how do you balance those two things?
Must be tough just getting all the superstars all the time. And we just watch ours walk away, which we might have to touch on later. Hopefully not. But let's move into some prospect territory here. You guys didn't have a first round pick this year, and the ones you've had the last few years have been not highest. Obviously, you've had pretty successful teams the last few years, but you did get a guy in the second round in Malcolm Spence, 43rd overall. That was significantly lower than. I couldn't find anyone who ranked that kid that low. Not one person, as far as other dummies on the internet like us. I couldn't find anyone that thought he was a 43rd overall ranked player yet. Every pick went by, and I'm like, okay, he's not getting picked. He's not getting picked and not getting picked. And finally, the free fall stopped, and I think the Rangers were more than content to go up there and make him their first choice. So what was the reception there with the Malcolm Spence pick? And we think it was one of the best value picks of the draft. Is that kind of the feeling that you guys are taking away and say, hey, we actually did get a first round talent here, even though we didn't have a first round pick?
Yeah, that's the consensus. I think you hit the nail on the head. Sometimes, drafting is 6 parts scouting, 4 parts good fortune. And the Rangers, I think you make an argument the last 2 years, 2 of the last 3 years, like good fortune has been the Rangers' best friend in the draft. I don't pretend to be well-versed in NHL prospects. If you guys wanted me to register an opinion about like the 225th best prospect in baseball, I got your back. Hockey, it's just so much harder. And I'm curious to hear your guys' opinion because you're from the Great White North. You probably grew up with the CHL world. The junior circuit is in your blood. I wouldn't be surprised if both of you at one point didn't play juniors. I just temper all my expectations usually. I mean, Spence, it's different. I believe he's at Michigan now, so he'll be in the NCAAs, which I think is a good thing. I just think the competition is, I would say harder simply because he's going to be going up against older players, which is not something he'd have the benefit of doing in Canada. But, he's a guy that shouldn't have been there at 43. That doesn't make him one of the 10 best players in the draft, but the Rangers got overvalue for a, middling second-round pick. So it's the best of what you could have hoped for. I'm a firm believer in always just taking best player available. There's so many variables that go into what makes a prospect take that leap, continue his trajectory, become an impactful NHLer, that if you're drafting for position, especially outside of the first round, I think you're just cutting your legs off. Would it have been better if the Rangers were able to get a centerman that had the similar ceiling that Malcolm has? Absolutely. But that player was never going to be available to you at 43. So you just have to take the best talent that's available to you there. And it's so hard. It's so hard for a second round pick to develop into even Will Cooley, that you just have to be happy that type of player was there. Just like I said, 2 years ago, you had to be happy that for whatever reason, Gabe Perreault was available to you when you took him with a mid-20s pick in the first round. He wasn't supposed to be there. You thank your lucky stars he was, and then you try to figure everything out after that.
So we like Spence, again, I don't know if there's superstar ability there, but there was a guy that could kind of play all situations on the ice that we thought was available there, that, we thought he was a late first round pick, mid-20s type guy.
He's a guy that should have an NHL career.
Yeah.
And if you're getting that with the 43rd overall pick, I think you have to be happy. I'm not saying he's going to become a second coming of Chris Kreider, right? I never have those expectations with the prospect. But at 43rd overall, if I'm drafting a player that I'm fairly confident will play in the NHL for my team, that's a win. I think fans, we have so much information and so much knowledge about all prospects now, not just top end guys, but your seconds, your thirds, your fourth round picks, that we forget just how hard it is to be one of the 20 guys in the lineup on a given night. And Spence should, if things continue the way they are going, barring any possible variable we haven't talked about, Spence should have an NHL career. And that's just not a lock when you're taking someone 43rd. That's how hard this league is. So if all he is a third line winger, that's phenomenal coming from a second round pick.
Yeah. I mean, we kind of thought that was kind of his baseline, was kind of a third line winger, but he has the ability to play in all situations. So we thought it was a really good pick. Now, you had spoken, I guess, some of your past, kind of drafts there. I guess, what are your thoughts of the way that, Chris Drury has drafted? Are you happy with their drafts in the past couple of years, how they've gone, how some of these guys have developed? Is that something you've been happy with, or do you think they could have done a little bit better?
It's tough. The Rangers historically picked so late in the first round the last couple of years, especially under Chris Drury, that, it's hard to be really moved by any top pick. I think that's what made getting Perreault as exciting as it was, because, I didn't know anybody that didn't have Perreault in the lottery. I feel like I talk to enough people and we read enough online content that it seemed to be a unanimous opinion that Gabe Perreault should have been one of the first 15 picks in the draft. And for whatever reason, he wasn't. So Chris Drury just did the easy thing, which is say his name at the draft. But like last year, they had the 30th overall pick. They took EJ Emery, who had, from all accounts, a bad season at North Dakota. But, like, I don't have a problem with Drury taking him simply because, again, 30th overall, that is really hard to take an impactful NHLer at that point in the draft. I personally would be a lot more critical of Drury's drafting if Drury had constantly been picking in the lottery and we'd be getting duds. But simply because the Rangers have been picking so late and how hard it is for the Rangers or any team in the NHL to get a ton of talent out of their later round picks, I think it would be unfair to throw a hissy fit about the Rangers struggling to develop their own draft picks. I just, I think Perreault's going to have a lot of pressure on him this year. But at the same time, like Drury, if Perreault doesn't shake out, the Rangers will get blamed for it. But, like, there's only so much the Rangers can do. Like, if the player isn't the player, at what point are we angry at the player? I guess is just the question.
Yeah, I think you made a good point. I mean, no one really – I forget what I had Perreault, but it was no lower than 12. I think 10, but 10 to 12 is kind of where I had him that year. And it seems that every year there's a couple guys where it's just like, who's going to take him? But and it may not even be a case where teams don't like them. They may just like one player a little bit more, right? And then a guy falls 5 or 10 spots. And I mean, in Perreault's case, it was that much. And then in Spence's case, even more. So I think the Rangers, they made a couple of very, very good value picks. And even a guy like Emery, he has the tools where despite a down season, I mean, you can see why they picked that guy and how he fits into the lineup down the road. So those are your big guys. Now, are there any guys that are maybe a little bit out of the mainstream attention that could be like, could be like your boy Will, who kind of pops off and goes off for 20 plus, and maybe not next year as a rookie, but someone like that where maybe he's not getting mainstream attention, but the Rangers fans are kind of looking forward to seeing him in the lineup? Or do you guys just blow your load on rentals every year trying to win the Stanley Cup? I don't remember what that's like as a fan of the Sens. So,
listen, I have no problem. I feel like I'm the rarity these days when it comes to talking about sports. Where like I am happy to at all times trade a first round pick. I have never met a player that I wouldn't trade a first round pick for. I'd trade multiple first round picks if I really like the guy. Like if the Boston Bruins came to the Rangers last year and said, hey, man, we're about to trade Brad Marchand to the Panthers. Would you give us an additional first-round pick? I'd be like, yeah. When do you want it by? Which first-round pick do you want? Like, I don't care. But to answer your question more directly, in Ranger circles, his name's already percolating a little bit. So I mentioned Mika Zibanejad's going to be playing the right wing. I don't expect you guys to look at a Rangers depth chart anytime soon, but there is a gaping giant hole at center on third line. And the Rangers don't have a ton of prospects that can really push their way into the conversation in terms of opening night. But Noah Laba is a kid that the Rangers are excited about. He had a really successful collegiate career. He made his debut in the AHL towards the end of the season last year, held his own, didn't blow anybody off the pages. But it's one of those situations, kind of like Cooley, where the Rangers are going to have such a critical need at center in their third line mix that you're going to have to address that somehow. And if we're not, as you said, blowing our load, like I would, for who, I don't know. But if we're not going to make a trade immediately, you're going to need someone to step up in that role. And the most talented of those players, I don't think he's ready. I think he needs a full year in Hartford. I wouldn't even tempt myself with calling him up, but Noah Laba would fit the bill of a guy that Ranger fans are excited about. And I think that excitement does come from a deep, deep place of need in the organization. He's like, if it's not him, it's probably nobody at center that could come up for the Rangers in the next 2 years. And that's a bad place to be. So, yeah, I'd say there are a lot of eggs in that basket, a lot of fish in that barrel.
So, kind of move forward here. We'll go to the off-season moves here. K'Andre Miller's out. We have Gavrikov in. And then you got Scott Morrow back in a trade as well. And Kreider also, gone, as you said, and you kind of say he was checked out last year. How are you feeling about those moves? Are you happy some of them are more futures based? I'm assuming not with some of the comments you've made. You want to use those to get other assets. But how do you feel about those moves that were made by the front office?
Yeah, I mean, we got 2 first-round picks to trade next year, gentlemen. So, come on, I can get 2 players for that. That sounds great. The Gavrikov signing is the easiest one because it's the clearest win. There was legitimate fear, after the Columbus Blue Jackets signed Provorov to his monster contract that Gavrikov was suddenly going to get $9+ million. The fact that the Rangers got Gavrikov to sign for 7, sure, I don't want to give him 7 years, but with the salary cap rising as it is, such a digestible contract that Gavrikov got. He's immediately going to slot in on a top pair with Adam Fox, provides Adam Fox a world of stability that he hasn't had each of the last 2 years, and it immediately strengthens the Rangers' defensive core by simply not worrying about who's going to play the 25 toughest minutes of the night. So Gavrikov, a huge win there. I'm a fan of the K'Andre Miller trade. I just think there were so few places on the Rangers roster where you could still trade a player near his fullest value and get interesting pieces in return. If the Rangers wanted to trade Mika Zibanejad, it was not going to be for anything interesting. They'd have to eat a ton of salary. The Chris Kreider trade, I think people are lukewarm on Carey Terrence, but none of us have actual expectations that this kid is suddenly going to become something that nobody has predicted him to be at any point in his development curve. So K'Andre, you got a really interesting defensive prospect in return in Morrow, who should play immediately, which helps. You got the first-round pick, which, like I said, the Rangers are going to need a center. And if you want to trade for a center in this league, you have to be willing to cough up a first-round pick. And the Rangers now have 2 of those. And then, the Rangers didn't do a ton after that. Taylor Radish is a perfectly solid, perfectly fine middle 6 winger that hopefully plays a third-line role for the Rangers. They've stuck with Carson Soucy, which I don't mind. That's a opinion many Ranger fans would have hoped they would have been able to jettison him. I think he's got a bit of a bad rap from Ranger fans. I think he was a little better than people want to give him credit for when he came over here. They re-upped Will Borgen, who I also think is a perfectly capable, perfectly fine defenseman. Gavrikov was a clear win. I think the K'Andre Miller trade, look, if he goes to Carolina and he's great, I think that's great for them. It clearly wasn't going to happen here, whether that was because of the situation the Rangers had put him in, or that was because K'Andre just wouldn't be comfortable fully in New York. I think at some point you have to admit this isn't really working out. We've plateaued for 2 years now. We're not making that clear step forward that we trusted you to make in order to take our team to another level. And at that point, are you going to pay K'Andre Miller big money? Or are you going to pay Vlad Gavrikov big money? And I just think Gavrikov is safer. That's not fun. That's not as sexy, but Morrow's going to have a chance to run. And he's going to be able to do it in a position where he's not necessarily at the forefront, right? He'll never have to be the scoring defenseman in a lineup with Adam Fox. So he gets to play his best hockey with essentially no pressure on him. I'd say this summer went about as well as it could have. I would have loved to see more moves simply getting people out of here. But, Mika Zibanejad controls his own future, right? No movement clause. If he doesn't want to go, he's not going. JT Miller was big business that they did in the middle of the season. So you're wedded to him. And then, like, you know, who's the player you trade Alexis Lafreniere for? The three of us joked about who that player is before we started recording. But, like, I'm not trading Alexis Lafreniere for just, trying to think of a name off the top of my head.
Will Borgen.
Trevor Zegras.
Yeah, I wouldn't trade Lafreniere for Zegras, but, like, even bigger fish than that. Like, would I feel great about trading Alexis Lafreniere for Lucas Raymond? I don't know if I'd feel great about it. I don't know if I'd say no, but I'm not, like, over the moon. If you're trading Alexis Lafreniere, at that point, you should just be happy paying the extra 60 cents on top of that and getting an actual difference maker into your team, as opposed to trading Alexis Lafreniere for just a safer version of Alexis Lafreniere.
I want to follow up with what you just touched on, because DeAndre Miller was interested. Obviously, if we're talking from an asset management standpoint, you move Miller out. You obviously get young defensemen who can play this year and more. You get the first, and you sign Gavrikov. So net asset management, that's obviously a home run for the Rangers there, bringing in another defenseman to fill that role and getting some stuff on top that they can use later. But what kind of, in your opinion, happened? And you touch on it a little bit, but geez, those first 3 years for Miller in New York, he just looked like he could, you know, he could step into the role that Trouba was obviously set to vacate and become a very, very feared and effective two-way defenseman. He had 43 points. He showed some offense. He showed some snarl. He hit guys. He played some tougher minutes. But then, like you said, he plateaued for 2 straight years. What do you think kind of went on there? Was it just too much pressure, or did he just, you know, were other guys taking up the roles that maybe he was best suited for? Because I was always a fan of him, and I found it curious that they couldn't find a way to make it work with a guy who has that kind of that kind of talent that's obvious with him.
You know, it's dangerous to play the game of trying to speak to what was going on for him. So instead of trying to do that, I think it's important to note that Keandre Miller, while he was only a Ranger for a short period of time, I mean, he had 3 different coaches. The way Gerard Gallant ran the Rangers and the way Peter Laviolette ran the Rangers were incredibly different. He was asked to do different things under every different coach that he played for. For whatever reason, you get the impression from Peter Laviolette that he needs his guys to play his system, as opposed to trying to fit a system to complement the skills of the players. And for a lot of guys on the Rangers, I mean, this was a President Trophy winning team 2 years ago. So it's clear that there was a lot of buy-in. But for whatever reason, the buy-in did not exist in year 2, despite very little personnel overturn and no change whatsoever to the coaching staff. Consistency is just it's the mother of everything, right? You can flash potential and talent and skill at the highest end, but if you're not able to replicate success on a night in, night out basis, teams will pick you apart and they will find holes in your game. And it's tough because Keandre, let's call a spade. Like, playing next to Jacob Trouba is a big ask. Even if you like the game Jacob Trouba plays, the other defenseman on that pairing has a lot of on-ice responsibility to cover. And that is a huge ask for a young player like Keandre Miller. And there were nights where he clearly overmatched him. It's an issue of consistency where Keandre on one night could look all world, but the next 3 games just look horrendous. And I think if you're the Rangers, if you're a playoff team, you kind of need to establish a high floor with your defensemen as opposed to a high ceiling. I think you need your more explosive players to come from. If you can have an explosive defenseman, obviously it helps. The Florida Panthers have Aaron Ekblad. They have Gustav Forsling. They have a bunch of guys who can do dangerous things from the blue line. But, the Rangers had Adam Fox, and then they had nothing else. And it's almost like K'Andre was chasing that Adam Fox apple of being this difference maker on both ends of the ice that I think anytime he tried to focus too much on one end, it just disrupted the balance in his game. And when you take K'Andre Miller off this team, you are losing a significantly high ceiling player. Because if K'Andre Miller figures it out, and if K'Andre Miller is able to put it all together, he's going to be a top 10 defenseman in the NHL. But you moved him out to bring in arguably the highest floor defenseman that exists in the NHL. You know exactly what you're getting every night from Vlad Gavrikov. You know exactly what he brings to your lineup. You assume how that pairing with Adam Fox is going to play, but you know what you're getting. You're getting a 25-minute-a-night defenseman who can kill penalties. And with K'Andre Miller, for every one night that he looked like that player, there was at least one night where he looked like a bottom pair situational defenseman. And I just think at some point, if you're Chris Drury, you look at the season the Rangers just had and how inconsistent it was from day 1 to day 82. I think at some point you get a young player and a first-round draft pick, and at the same time sign a player to immediately fill a role that K'Andre Miller, you didn't have the confidence he could fill on this team. I think it's an easy trigger to pull.
So just kind of want to go back to one player you mentioned here, Alexis Lafreniere, or Lafreniere. I don't know. I have the Don Cherry French thing going here. Look, he had a great playoff a couple years ago. You've seen, again, you talk about the high upside. There is an upside with this player. Where are you on him? Are you again, you talk about trading him earlier, but it doesn't sound like you're totally on board with trading him. And the other thing I wanted to talk about too, didn't really seem to get a lot of offensive opportunity, at least in our opinion, early in his career. That's kind of stunted his growth a bit. And do you expect that maybe this year might be the year that it maybe translates a bit more?
Well, I'll answer the second question first. I've never believed not getting power play time should be a reason why a player isn't developing as quickly as he should be. Because, sure, he hasn't gotten power play 1, and we'll see if he gets power play 1 this year. It's an open question if he will. When you have a team that has Artemi Panarin, Adam Fox, those two guys are locked into spots on your top power play unit. So then the question becomes, how do you get the other 3 spots? Well, the Rangers have had Mika Zibanejad. They've had Vincent Trocheck. They now have JT Miller. They've had Chris Kreider. Calling Alexis Lafreniere the 6th best offensive weapon the Rangers have had in previous years was never an insult to Alexis Lafreniere. You were just on the wrong team, my guy. Every other team, if they had the number 1 pick that year, would have been able to feed Alexis Lafreniere top 6 minutes of power play 1 time the second he got off the bus. He came to a team that just had stars. That's not his fault. It's also not the Rangers' fault for having good players. So I don't think it should have stunted his growth. Simply because the 15 extra points he would have gotten getting secondary assists on a power play, to me that just doesn't signal whether a player is good or bad. His point figures would have been higher. He would have looked nicer on paper. But no, it was a hard year for Alexi because Vincent Trocheck was bad all year. And if your center is bad, that's gonna reverberate throughout the entire line. Artemi Panarin was being moved up and down the lineup on a nice nightly basis. So if Panarin started a game with Lafreniere, he usually didn't end the game with Lafreniere. It was just chaos and disorder. And now here's the thing. Lafreniere was part of the problem. He also did not take the big step forward I think management was hoping he would take. That's why they signed him to extension as early in the season as they did. They figured this is a player trending upward. He's been a dog in the playoffs, absolute beast every time. The kid line is the thing that got fans the most out of their seat anytime the Rangers went on a run. But it stagnated for Lafreniere, and this year will be a very telling year. I think Lafreniere, I think he's one of the players that deserves a do-over. Because I just think there were more important pieces that were failing around him that I'm at least willing to give Lafreniere, who's only 25, he's still a baby, or 24. I'm willing to give him a do-over that I might not be willing to give Mika Zibanejad. And then the trade piece of it, well, it's as simple as there are only so many faces you can trade, right? Like, you're not trading Igor Shesterkin. You're not trading Adam Fox. You can't trade Mika Zibanejad. You can't trade JT Miller. So, like, you could probably find a trade for Vincent Trocheck, but taking another centerman off this team isn't going to help them. Lafreniere plays the one position on this team the Rangers actually have bodies, which is wing. Because if you take Lafreniere out, you got Perreault, you got Othman, you got Brett Berard. You have players in the system that could, in theory, backfill, if not reproduce everything he does. And then he's one of the few pieces other teams are going to want. But like I said, I'm not trading Alexis Lafreniere for a lateral move. If the Vancouver Canucks want to give the Rangers a call because they can't keep Quinn Hughes, and they ask the Rangers for Alexis Lafreniere, I'm not hanging up the phone. I'm happy to have that conversation. But, like, if the Minnesota Wild call and they're like, hey, Marco Rossi's not too happy here, what do you want to do? I'm like, nothing. Thanks for calling. Talk to you later. So, like, when I say I would trade Alexis Lafreniere, like, the package has to be right. And there aren't that many players I would trade him for, but there are absolutely players I would trade him for, especially on the back of last year, when I'm not overly thrilled with his performance.
I think with him, it's tough because he has so much. The first overall pick, you come into the league with some clout, and he obviously has had some success and in the playoffs where it's important. And then you look at what he did last year, and it's you're right as a fan expecting a certain caliber of player. But if you're to call any one of those GMs and ask for those handful of players that you might be interested in acquiring, they're probably going to laugh you off the phone based on what he's done the last year, right? You call Ottawa and say, hey, we want to talk Brady Click. That conversation's over before it starts. But a lot of upside there. He scored 28, I think, a couple of years ago. So obviously the talent's there. He went first overall for a reason. But you mentioned that you're willing to give him a break. Some other guys are going to need to get some breaks or change their performance big time if they're going to come back to the team that they look like they could be, I suppose, next year. So with that, I'll ask you kind of, what are your expectations? They were huge going into last year. Obviously, the team shit the bed by absolutely any measure. So which version of the Rangers are you expecting? And how many games into the year are you willing to wait and find out before we start hearing Artemi Panarin's name in the trade mill?
I mean,
pending UFA.
We shouldn't hear his name once before the Olympic break. So, because even like the Rangers shouldn't be, even if if the Rangers start by losing the first 12 games of the year, right? If they somehow find a way to bottom out further, there's no need for the Rangers to rush the market, right? Let the market develop to you. This is, guys, we follow the most boring league in North America. Like, GMs will find it disrespectful to trade a player before the Olympic break. They won't want to upset a player's rhythm if they are trying to get ready for the Olympics. Now, honestly, an advantage the Rangers have is Russia's a piece of shit, so they're not invited. So, like, we're good. Panarin and Igor don't have to worry about the Olympics. They got no problem. As far as my expectations go, this should be a playoff team. Last year was a disaster. And even as bad of a disaster as it was for the New York Rangers, that was a team that didn't get eliminated from playoff contention until the final week of the season. That was a doomsday season from the New York Rangers. And it took them more than 75 games to get eliminated from playoff contention. This should be a team that finishes in the top 3 in the Metro. I don't think this is a team that should win the Metro. I don't even think it's a team that should finish second in the Metro. I don't think the Hurricanes or the Devils have any excuses to not finish 1-2 in the Metro in some order. I do expect the Rangers to finish third. I don't expect the Rangers to finish any lower than fourth. And then, look, when you have Igor Shesterkin, I can't sit here and tell you that, like, a cup is impossible. It's improbable, given what we know about the makeup of the Rangers roster. But they have a cup-winning coach. They have a cup-caliber goalie. They have a ton of talent on this team. So it is not an impossibility that it can go on a cup run. It's not what I'm expecting. I'm expecting this team to make the playoffs. I'm expecting them to win exactly one round in the playoffs. And then I'm expecting them to lose in 6 games and enjoy their summer. I think that's where my expectation is. That's not me saying I'd be happy with that, but I think that is a fair expectation to have of this Ranger team.
For that to happen, who are some of the, like, again, just what players, I guess, would really have to take a step up from what they were last year? And 2, I guess, you have a new coach in Mike Sullivan. Do you think the new coach will have that big of a, would have that big of a difference on the roster here? Was it that much of a kind of a tune-out last year?
I think the coach is going to have a significant impact. I think getting out from under some of the voices that were in that locker room simply is going to have a bigger impact. I think the coach needed to change as well, but more importantly, a lot of this roster is different. I know many of these guys came in mid-season, but many of the old head voices aren't here anymore. So I think a new wave of voice is about to take over the locker room. This is essentially Vincent Trocheck's team. Like, it's kind of built in his image. If Vincent Trocheck is ever going to run away with that kind of power and responsibility, this is the group to do it with. On our podcast, there are 2 guys that are going to really hold the keys to the season. 3, if you want to include. Like, you can't escape Mika Zibanejad. Mika Zibanejad is going to have to play well in order for the Rangers to succeed. But he's third in my eyes. We've talked about one of them, Alexis Lafreniere. He's going to have to take a big step forward, whether that's on the power play or just entrenched on a top 6 role. Like, he's going to have a better season. And then, to me, the player that everything really, really determines whether the Rangers are simply good or great is Braden Schneider. This is a team that they traded Keandre Miller. Yes, they brought in Vlad Gavrikov, but this team is going to ask a lot out of Braden Schneider. He's going to be in a top 4 role. He's going to play on his offhand to start the season. He's going to kill a lot of penalties. He's supposedly healthy for the first time in 2 years, but there's, like, again, I'm not worried about Gavrikov and Fox. That's going to be fine, but there's still 35 minutes of hockey that is going to be played when those 2 guys are not on the ice. And Braden Schneider is going to get a lot of those important minutes. If I'm not a Braden Schneider guy. I would have been happy to trade Schneider as the key piece to get JT Miller. I would have traded Braden Schneider for just about anybody this offseason that I thought could have helped the forwards. The Rangers have trusted Braden Schneider ever since they drafted him. They like the player. They like what he does, but they've never asked him to do anything. He's always played a bottom defensive pairing role. He's never played high leverage minutes. He's going to be put in high leverage minutes, playing with I like Will Borgen, but Will Borgen is not a big name defenseman. Braden Schneider's going to play a pivotal role for the Rangers this year. And he will be the reason if the Rangers defensive core is better or worse than last year. It's going to come down to him. And I don't know if Ranger fans understand that. It's been something I've been trying to preach for a while. But, yeah, it is crazy that on a team with Adam Fox, Igor Shesterkin, JT Miller, Mika Zibanejad, Alexis Lafreniere, Artemi Panarin, Vincent Trocheck, Braden Schneider is who's going to decide if we're good or bad this year. But, like, he is. If he's bad, you have no defensive depth. None. And now not only do you not have – you're missing a center and a top 4 defenseman. You can't be missing both those things. going into the season and expecting to win a lick. So if the Rangers are missing both those things, I think we'll know quickly. But yeah, Braden Schneider's the guy to me, where like all eyes on him. If he messes this up, I'm not going to be happy. I'm going to say I told you so to some people, and you guys will know exactly whose fault it is.
Fair enough. Well, who now? Okay. Speaking of the blame, Chris Drury, new extension, has his fingerprints firmly all over this team now. What are the thoughts on him? What kind of confidence do we have in him? Is he the right guy to get this ship back on track, or is that maybe one of the people you were talking about when there's already enough blame to go around for maybe what some people think could be a sinking ship?
I'll start by saying I think Chris Drury's been fine. I think he's
a ringing endorsement.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's hard to give any general manager in the National Hockey League a true ringing endorsement, with like maybe the exception of Julien Brisebois, who always figures it out. And I guess, well, like I'd be curious if Vegas would be able to do all the things Vegas does if they weren't in Vegas, you know? Like if Vegas just played in Oklahoma City, are they still pulling as much tail as they get? I don't know. I think Drury's fine. I don't. There have been few transactions that he's flat out lost, especially since his first year in charge. I think the best thing Chris Drury has going for him, and I think this is crazy for non-New York sports fans to hear, but I believe this to my core. The best thing Chris Drury has going for him is that Leon Rose has made the Knicks really good. As long as Leon Rose is making the Knicks competitive and good, Chris Drury has the longest leash in the world. James Dolan likes him, and I think people get this impression that James Dolan is a short-tempered, always on the trigger, you're never safe with me guy. He hates firing people. He doesn't like doing it. I'm talking decision makers. He gave Phil Jackson 2 years longer than Phil Jackson deserved. I'm sure he'd still try to employ Isaiah Thomas today if he could. If the position existed, that man would be employed by the Knicks. So the only reason Gorton and John Davidson got fired when they did is because they went against James Dolan. If Gorton and Davidson never came out against that memo that Dolan put out that said the player safety is not protecting my guys, this is ridiculous, this was a disgrace that happened at MSG. What got Davidson and Gorton fired was them going behind that message the Rangers sent out and said, this guy's nuts. We didn't say that. We think it's fine. And they got fired. I think Drury's leash is a lot longer than Ranger fans want it to be. I think they'd have to finish dead last or near there in the league for him to get fired. And simply put, like I said, this roster has too much talent for the Rangers to be that bad. If the Rangers are that bad, sure, some of it will be Chris Drury's fault. I'll be looking at the players. There's just too much talent here. Even with the problems I told you guys, like this is a team that doesn't have a third-line center, and Braden Schneider has all this responsibility. I understand that makes them like potentially not a playoff team, but what's the scenario where the Rangers finished worse than like 14th overall in terms of where their draft pick would be in the first round? You have the best goalie in the league. You have one of the best wingers in the league. You have one of the best defensemen in the league. You have JT Miller. Like, this is a really good hockey team. It should be good. If they're not good with this coach, I don't know. We run out of people to blame at that point. Like at that point, I'll blame. I'll find a way to blame literally my parents. Like if I need to, anything. Like it's just ridiculous at that point.
So you've spoken about kind of how you feel about management. What's the fan base's actual feelings on the team? Like, are they as down on them as you? Is it kind of, as you said, the Knicks were really good last year. And I know, speaking of the basketball reference, I am a Raptors fan myself, so I do follow the league. Yeah. They were a very good team last year. does that kind of cover some of, is historically, would that cover some of the Rangers if they're not so good? Does that kind of give them some cover, or how's that kind of work?
There are to me, now these fans exist for sure, but there are very few Ranger first New York sports fans. Again, they exist. I know they exist. I've met a ton of them, but the Rangers usually get to operate under the cover of darkness until late October, because usually the Mets or the Yankees are usually still playing baseball. The Giants and Jets have started playing football. You need the Giants and Jets to establish themselves as bad before we get to the point where like fans would get angry about the Rangers. And look, that might happen quickly this year. We might not get through September before people are like, oh my God, what is this slop that I am seeing on a Sunday? I think the fans last year took a lot out of all of us. I think it's been really hard for fans to kind of pull the ripcord again, to get really excited. Usually we're in September now. NFL week 1 is here, playoff baseball is here, but usually there's like a palpable buzz brewing that like, the hockey's coming back. The hockey's always good. Hockey's been good to us for a while. We'll have something fun to cheer about. I would say the most optimistic Ranger fan is cautiously optimistic, whereas in most years they would say, "Oh, this is a cup contender." I think last year did a lot of damage. It's been, I mean, for me personally, like I can only speak for myself, my own feelings. It's going to take a lot for the Rangers to make me like legitimately excited to watch a hockey game, just because of the stench on last year is so palpable that, talking about it is not going to make it go away. They're going to have to play promising hockey for me to be like, all right, it's in the rearview mirror. We can move on now. We can trudge forward now. So like, this is the quietest it's been around the Rangers for quite some time. I think people have been happy to be angry about other things in New York sports. We've gotten so tired of being angry about the Rangers over the last 6 months that it's been nice to be angry about the Mets not pitching, or the Yankees playing bad fundamental baseball, or the Jets for existing, or the Giants for starting Russell Wilson. Like we've been happy about that. It's been nice to be angry about something else.
I love the New York progression of rage that kind of flows like the seasons through the different major sports leagues that you guys have now. Like, is the true calling for me as a Sens fan? My dream is to see them win the Stanley Cup one day. Is a New York sports fan true calling that moment of greatness in their team success, or is it that progression of rage that you just kind of you guys just get to unleash your whole life into the anger at your sports teams? This fucking guy can't drive in traffic. I'm going to be mad at the Jets. That took me 4 hours to get 3 blocks in this city. I'm going to be mad at the Giants. Like, do we really care about the titles, or are we just trying to get some venting out here through sports?
No, I mean you hit on something close there. The angriest I've ever been the angriest I'll ever be at any point in my life is slow walkers in New York City. If you're not from New York City and you're walking slow, get the fuck out of my way. Like you're just killing me. I'm not even a fast walker by New York standards. I'm a slow boy. But if a tourist from out of town is kind of just meandering down a sidewalk, like I'll put you in a stairwell, homeboy. Like you got to move. New York sport fans don't want to be angry. We're good at being angry. It is a special breed of anger that we have created. But like our anger comes from a place of love. Whereas Philadelphia, they're such sick and disgusting people that they just literally want to be angry. Like as a fan base, we don't throw batteries and snowballs at Santa Claus. Like we'll tell Santa Claus to get the fuck out of our way, but we're not going to like physically assault the poor boy. No, we don't look forward to being angry. But if we're going to be angry, we want to make a spectacle of it. I think that's the New York mindset. We're like, I'd much prefer to be happy. I'd love to be happy. I'd love to have no worries in the world. It's just that my sports teams don't usually give me that. So I have to be angry. But if I'm going to be angry, I'm going to make it special.
Growing up in a Italian immigrant household, the way you just said, I'm angry out of love was triggering in so many different ways that I don't care to get into, but I do understand.
Buddy, it's okay. We come from essentially like different branches of the same tree because I had a Jewish mother my entire life. All I've known is anger since day one. That's it.
Fair enough. Greg, this has been absolutely fantastic. Thank you so much for taking some time out of the Mets game to join us and talk a little hockey. Even though we're in the off season, it's been great to get to chat Rangers and I gotta say, boys, we're on a roll here. We've only had one happy guest so far. We've had one guest. We've covered now close to half the league, and precisely one guest has been optimistic.
Was it a Panther fan?
No, it was it was the Carolina Hurricanes fan, actually.
Yeah, he's young though. He was young.
He doesn't understand.
No, he was in his 20s still. He doesn't know real life misery.
He doesn't even know how offensive it is when those assholes put on Hartford Whaler jerseys. Fuck you. Like that is. I don't go to like imagine a basketball team with if the Oklahoma City Thunder wore Seattle Supersonic throwback jerseys, I think the state of Washington would secede from the Union and attack Oklahoma. Like it would be blood.
So I should retire my Vancouver Grizzlies jersey then.
But you're not. Are you a fan of the Memphis Grizzlies?
No, I'm a Raptors guy now.
No, then you're good. Like then it's just I don't have a problem with people wearing a Hartford Whalers jersey. That's fine. That's a fun throwback, and it is a beautiful jersey. I have a problem when the hockey team that stole that franchise then wears the laundry. That's a step too far for me. That's offensive.
I suppose that's a little salt in the wound.
Yeah, well, I grew up in Connecticut, so like that when I was an itty bitty when the Whalers still existed, that was the only team in town. We had Hartford Whalers hockey and we had UConn basketball. That was it. And then I lived close to the New York border, so I would just be in the city, which is how I became a New York sports fan. But like, we didn't have a professional team except the Whalers, and then they just decided to move to Carolina of all places, and not even like fun Charlotte. They went to fucking Raleigh. Like, it's not near anything. Have you guys like you? I lived in the South for a little bit, and I was like, oh, I'll go to a Ranger game. It was like a 7-hour drive from Georgia. It was terrible.
The NHL loves putting teams in the suburbs, honestly. Like, that seems to be their go-to move when they expand. Get a team, put them in the suburbs. Unless, like you said, they go to Vegas and they get to be the most fun franchise in all of hockey, which is not.
Oh, no, yeah, it'll be fine, though. Atlanta's going to finally work. We've missed the first 3 times, but the 4th time is going to be the charm.
Can we get a fucking team in Quebec City? Like, oh my God, guys, this is foolproof. Like, they're going to show up. French people love hockey more. I shouldn't generalize races, but French people love hockey more than any other group of people on this entire planet, and it's not even close. Give them another team. They deserve it. Quebec City would work. Bring back the Nordiques. Come on. Everyone wants back.
Look, you don't need an American sitting here and telling you this, but no American's going to watch a hockey game in Quebec City. It's just a fact of life. And if you're not – this is what sucks. It's just like if you're not going to have your key audience just tune you out. The NHL has done such a terrible job of marketing Canadian teams in America because Americans will watch Canadian hockey. It's not like we're just not interested in Oilers Flames, but you're not showing us Oilers Flames. So then we can't enjoy it. We don't know it exists. Therefore, we don't watch. And then Gary uses that as a reason to not put that. Did you guys see? I know we're getting out of here, and I'll get off my soapbox. But the Chicago Blackhawks are going to be on 15 national TV games in America this year. Just fucking kill me now. I don't want to watch this shit team. They're awful. But because we're in Chicago, we got to watch them.
You know what team isn't on there? Team with the American captain.
Oh, and the Senators. That's
Yeah,
right.
with the American captain.
It's idiotic. It's in an Olympic year. There are 0 games with the Jets, who just won the President's Trophy, and 0 games with Brady Tkachuk, who is easily one of the 5 most marketable American-born players. Like, it's asinine. All because I have to watch Connor Bedard get his shit pushed in for like the 100th time. Why? I don't want to do this. Like this, just get me on the phone. Like this isn't that hard. You can sell a product that, you know how many Americans watch Premier League soccer now? I'm pretty sure none of those teams play in goddamn Chicago. Like we'll watch Wolverhampton Wanderers if you sell the product to us. We're fine.
I absolutely love it. Like, but you're right on the money. We need a market. You know, maybe we could have a whole new group of Sens fans in the States, and they'll have to stay Sens fans because that's where Brady Tkachuk is going to stay and hopefully retire. Hopefully with a nice fat Stanley Cup ring. I don't know. I'm used to being disappointed by my Sens, but one can dream, I suppose. Greg, this has been fantastic. If you guys are a fan of ours, please check out Greg at Blueshirts Breakaway. They're on Patreon. If you're a fan of Blueshirts Breakaway, check us out. Give us a follow as well. This has been great having you on and talking about, the other guy who came on for the Islanders, Rocco. Sorry, Rocco. Talking about the biggest team in New York tonight. So I'll just leave it at that. And boys, we'll catch you next time.
Thanks for having me, guys.
Yep. See you later.